Wow, I've seen that on a picture.
And they would do these little, it was stitches with ant mouths.
Wow.
And that was actually you've got to cut. This is how we do it. I mean, it's that kind of jungle medicine that works. There's so much medicine in the jungle, I feel
How did you keep? Oh, yeah, because there's so many things that need medication.
That's true. That's really true. Yeah. It's so much fun. I feel like a little kid going on to a candy store every time. I'm just this rod is double the weight of what I grew up on. Yep. And who knows what's in here? I mean, you have no idea what's in there.
Or what you're going to see next.
Yeah. It's the best feeling. And it teaches you how to work. I mean, there were days where I was just like, I don't want to muck another stall ever.
Right.
But I'm forever grateful for that, just get up and get shit done mentality.
Yeah, right.
And if you don't know how to do something, you learn it.
Hey, everybody. I wanted to remind all the listeners that the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers podcast and blast is sponsored by the Filson Company. And Filson's the original Alaskan outfitter. They've manufactured the toughest foul weather clothing and gear since 1897. When the job demands protection from thorny brush and wet weather, Filson's waxed tin cloth performs like no other fabric. Filson also has the clothing and gear outdoors men and women need for backcountry excursions of any kind, or fishing alpine lakes or stalking bull elk. With opening day right around the corner, now is the time to visit filson.com and gear up for a great hunting season to come. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Backcountry Hunters and Anglers podcast and blast. I am in Missoula, Montana. It's a hot day. End of July. Yeah. Been out and about down around Beartooth Plateau where it was a lot cooler. And I'm back with Jess Mcglothlin, who is a photojournalist and outdoor media global wanderer. I just realized that she's also been doing some AP reporting as a shooter, and covering some of the protests and some of the things that are going on in America.
Absolutely. I get bored, so I wear a lot of hats.
But they all involve carrying a camera.
They do.
You're a writer too, though, right?
True. Yeah. But my days of traveling light are long past, unfortunately.
Yeah. So you've been in Dallas?
I have. I've been in Dallas a bit this spring, and then mostly back here in Montana, which is unusual. Usually I'm on the road 6 or 8 months a year. So a summer home in Montana is tough, but a treat also.
Yeah. And last time when I met you, we were in Galveston, Texas.
Yeah.
At a media summit thing on the snapper seasons and all that. Remember?
Absolutely. It seems like a long time ago.
It does.
Yeah.
That storm cut all that electricity off.
Yeah. It was a party.
Yeah, it was. It was. There wasn't a whole. I did not do a lot of stories from that. Yeah. Because it was such a strange.
It was just trip.
Yeah. It was pouring rain. I remember that one time.
Yeah.
That's the first time I'd ever been in Galveston.
Galveston's fun.
It's pretty neat.
The Texas coast is something special.
It's hammered.
It is.
By storms. And it has been since the famous hurricane of 1910 or whenever it killed everybody.
Back. Yeah. And they've just had another one this week down south. So
gotcha. It looks really beat. Yeah. Bleached out by just the weather.
Oh, totally.
I mean, that's what it is.
Harsh. I lived down in Harlingen for a while, on the very bottom tip of Texas.
Wow.
And it's flat, harsh, tropical environment.
Wow. What did you do there?
I was 12 and 13. I was a kid, so I fished out of a sit-on-top kayak and went to school and did all that good stuff.
Is that the Laguna Sierra Madre? The Laguna Madre?
Laguna Madre, yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah, so it's solid down there.
Yeah, I bet. Oh, I'd love to go there.
Highly recommend it. Yeah. It's an easy DIY trip, too.
And Harlingen is not a desert, right?
No, it's grapefruit fields. I guess you call them fields of grapefruit groves.
Yeah.
It's very lush and tropical and hot, but pretty awesome.
Wow. So I think one of the things I got when I reminded myself to call you for this podcast was I was looking at your photos from Chile.
Oh, gotcha.
And I was realizing of the people I know in one of the most competitive businesses in the world.
Yeah.
Is photojournalism and shooting outdoor photography. And those images are really kind of blowing me away because for one, they're incredibly beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
You got it.
I appreciate it. I always wonder. It's hard to capture those places.
And also, you got to get up and do it the next day. Yeah. It's like writing a story. Everybody goes, "Well, you've written so many stories," And I go, "I ain't written this one."
Exactly. There's always more, which is the beauty and the frustration of it. I stay awake so many nights going, "Oh, there's so many places I want to get to and stories I want to tell." Yeah.
And so, and I guess one of the things I was interested in since I met you in Galveston was like, how do you make it in this sphere, in this incredibly competitive sphere? But first, how did you get here? So you were born in Columbia Falls?
Born
you grew there? Grew up there?
Salt Lake, actually.
Born in Salt Lake?
And moved to Montana, I think, when I was 2 weeks old. So Columbia Falls was home base, which is nice. But I grew up pretty rural in Montana. We had a commercial horse facility. So I grew up mucking stalls and wearing Carhartt and muck boots, which is still kind of my comfortable home base. Yeah. I knew I was an adult when I could officially fit a big truck and trailer through the Wendy's drive-thru in Kalispell and not break anything. That was a proud moment.
Wow. Yeah. How old were you then?
13, 14. Yeah,
gotcha.
It's starting young.
Yeah.
But it was a really good way to grow up because you're up every morning, Christmas morning, Thanksgiving morning, mucking stalls and managing horses, breaking a lot of bones, just doing dumb stuff that all kids should, I think. Sure.
And hopefully they survive.
Survived.
For sure.
Little sore some mornings from it, but survived from it.
You were homeschooled?
Homeschooled through high school.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I actually went to more traditional schools through 8th grade and had a disagreement with a teacher in 8th grade and was asked to leave the school.
Not uncommon.
No, but it was a nice private school in Kalispell, and they said, "Hey, we need her to leave." So I was asked to leave, and luckily had a mom who was a career teacher and a dad who was a physician, and he could handle the sciences and the math, and she could do the humanities. Yeah. So
y'all got along. You must have.
Pretty much. Yeah. I think all kids in high school have some issues, but luckily I could go hop on a horse and work most of it out.
Right. Gotcha. And you were south of Columbia Falls.
Yeah, just south.
In northern Flathead Valley, is that?
Yeah, exactly. Kind of between Columbia Falls and Kalispell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so being homeschooled like that with your parents, I don't think I could have done that with my kids, but not because we don't get along, just because of my own attention span.
Right.
It wouldn't have worked. But
as a parent, it would be incredibly difficult. I look back now and I'm kind of in awe of my folks.
Yeah,
just for the
sure.
patience to do that.
Yep. And the dedication.
100%.
You got to do this.
Yeah. There's not a day off. You know, you do the work.
Right. Did y'all work together in the horse business too?
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was family business. We didn't employ anyone. We just all kind of chipped in and did it.
And what was it?
Boarding and training mostly. We had a big indoor arena and 15 or so stalls, and then would keep 20 or so horses on pasture. So I with my mom, thankfully, generously doing it, I had an LLC at 13 and started training. Limited liability corporation. So just founded a business, went in and did all the paperwork.
Gotcha. Of your own?
Of my own. I think at that age, I was a 99% partner, and my mom had to be a 1% as a legal adult.
Guardian, yeah.
Yeah. But I remember filling out business paperwork at a very young age and opening a checking account and being like, this is how it works. This is the real world.
That's got to help in the business you run now.
100%.
Yeah.
It's the business education of running a business early on has been huge. I couldn't replace that. It's instrumental.
Right. Yeah, I can see that for sure. And like I said, that part of this when I was looking at this podcast idea to call you was like, how do you do it?
Right. Yeah.
And obviously you got the basics early.
I was lucky.
And what was your business?
Boarding. Well, that part, training horses. So I would teach lessons, and I would take on clients who would say, "Hey, I want you to put a month of riding essentially on my horse."
Gotcha.
And help the horse get over bad habits or help it learn some new skills.
And how did you learn that just from your parents growing up?
They weren't horsey. Self-taught. I had some really good instructors along the way who helped me figure some stuff out. But
Gotcha.
I was that kid ever since I was little who would go to the library and check out 20 books and lock myself in my room and read them.
The equine library?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, so
I think that's great.
obsessive, maybe a little bit, but it worked. It worked.
You know, the thing is, and I rode as a really young person.
Nice.
And I took lessons. I mucked stalls in return for Western lessons.
For you.
Yeah, it was good. But my sister was into it. She had a horse.
Awesome.
And then I just kind of followed into the barn. But here, and it didn't take in the same way. Like my son is doing horses now, and he has a much deeper view of it than I did. I got out when I was like 14,
Absolutely.
15. But the thing about being obsessed with that is you're obsessed with another animal that is endlessly deep.
Hugely deep, and they're all individuals.
Yeah.
You can figure one horse out, and then it helps you exactly 0% with the next horse.
Right, gotcha. Yeah. And it's another. I mean, it's a whole nother nation that you're dealing with. Being obsessed with animals like that, training, interacting, riding at a high level or whatever.
Right.
It makes your life huge.
It does, and it's very humbling. I think at the same time, it makes your life huge, and it also reminds you, like, hey, this thing can flip over on me and put me in the hospital.
Yeah, and often do.
Or I'll be the newspaper headline, kid killed by horse. Like, it's a very humbling thing, which I think is important for folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a life, what would you say? It's like a life art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it teaches you how to work. I mean, there were days where I was just like, I don't want to muck another stall ever.
Right.
But I'm forever grateful for that, like, just get up and get shit done mentality.
Yeah, right.
And if you don't know how to do something, you learn it.
Right. Because somebody's done it before.
Exactly.
Especially with the horses and stuff. Like, people have been doing it forever.
Totally. There's so many theories to study, and then you take what you want from each theory. And I think the same travels over to the work we do. Writing and photography is you're never going to exactly emulate someone else's style.
Right.
You kind of cherry pick bits and pieces from other folks, but you should never try to, and you never will succeed to exactly shoot or write the way someone else does.
Right.
And it's the same when you're in the saddle.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, we did a podcast with Tom McGlothlin here.
Oh, awesome.
It's one of my favorite ones ever.
Yeah.
And he's a master cutting horse guy. He was he won all kind of stuff, team roping.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's a huge part of his life, and he's written a lot about it.
Yeah.
But I don't think he didn't talk that much about it. If you don't know that world, he understands that he's in it in a way that he can't communicate. He's not going to,
Totally. He's truly in it.
He's truly in it. And so you can go back and read the essays he did.
Right. Yeah, and they're so well written. I'm forever in awe of him.
Yeah. I think he's probably one of the great prose stylists of
Absolutely.
The last 100 years even.
Yeah.
And he happens to be hilariously funny. Right. Which is like, that helps a lot.
It's rare to find those two in common, too.
Isn't it? Yeah. Like, you think of poets as being all grim, and
exactly.
burdened with their knowledge of the world.
Yeah. You got to have someone who can laugh it off, too.
Yeah, for sure. So you also did rodeo, though, right?
I did.
So you're Western English dressage?
Started Western, dabbled in kind of the high school rodeo thing, which was great because being homeschooled, that was my social life.
Yeah.
I had the business side, and then I could go be a Montana high school kid and do all kinds of things I shouldn't with my rodeo compadres.
Sure.
And then kind of got introduced to the world of English writing. Swore I'd never do it. I was a dyed-in-the-wool Wranglers and an Ariat Boots kid. Mm-hmm. And then started seeing the business potential, I think, on this other side. Because at that time, English writing was just picking up here in the West. Mm-hmm. We had the event at Rebecca Farm, which is now a big 3-day event in Kalispell that draws people from all over the world. And I actually wrote in the first year of that event. And
was it hard to pick up English after...
It was.
Saddle seat
They're
forever?
So different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really was. And I learned a lot on the English side. I carried over to the Western. Mm-hmm. There's a lot about self-carriage and they call it Schwung in German, kind of teaching a horse to carry themselves in a certain way that's really beneficial. It's like people. If we move in a certain way with our core engaged, we're going to feel better.
Yeah.
And horses have the same thing.
Interesting.
So there was a lot that carried over. And actually I was surprised a lot of similarity between the really high performance cutting horse riders that I knew and dressage. Like they want these horses to still kind of carry themselves the same way, like they're a little bouncing ball.
Yeah. Wow.
So it was interesting to contrast the two, but the business potential on the English side was interesting because I could start bringing in and taking on training horses. And there was a real interest in that market. It's like, it's any business. You go where there's a demand.
And where there's some money.
Exactly.
I mean, if you live long enough in Wyoming and Montana, you recognize. You ever been to a Moxie?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. They're the best.
They're real wild.
They're so, it's a party.
Yeah, it's a party.
Kids. Yeah.
And my daughter got into that when she was tiny.
Oh, how fun.
It was terrifying.
I'm sure as a parent, it's got to be really terrifying. Yeah.
But there are people, and I think about it in the same way. Little guy wrestling in the West is open to anybody. You don't even have to be able to afford a singlet.
Right.
You can just show up.
Just do it.
And the Moxies were like that, but you had a horse.
Right.
I just the money would definitely be in the English side of the world.
Yeah.
Because there's an enormous amount of like master horse people.
Oh, absolutely.
Who have no money at all. That live out in a trailer, way out in the prairie, in the sagebrush, and spend everything they got on traveling to a Moxie or a rodeo.
Absolutely.
And you can't make a living off those folks, but those folks are pretty wild and interesting.
So they're wild and interesting, and they're not often, occasionally. I mean, it's hard to find really good true horsemen, but I've been surprised. A lot of the best horsemen I've found have been folks like that, where they live and breathe it every day, and they don't have the fancy gear, but they have the skills. Yeah. And I'm amazed by those folks. Yeah. It's cool to watch.
I've just recently met some. I don't know how great they are, how great a horseman they are, because I don't consider myself a horseman.
Sure.
So I can't judge. But they've come to the West for that purpose, to live that life. Mm-hmm. And I think people have been doing this since like before the Civil War. Uh-huh. And they do it.
Yeah.
And they're like the buckaroos, the flat hatters.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're really good with a 60-foot rope.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And there's like, this is a culture.
Absolutely.
And a lot of them did not grow up in it. They chose it. And then they become it. And I think that's pretty cool.
It's really cool.
It gives us hope.
It gives us hope, and I thought about that a lot as a kid. I grew up reading Zane Grey novels. Zane Grey was like the author of my childhood. Well, and always struggled with that. And even now in Missoula, seeing so many people move in, I'm like, okay, what right do we as folks who have grown up in this culture have to stop people from coming in and honestly making a go at it? Like, I really admire folks who will say, yes, I want to commit to this. I want to come in and learn it. Yep. Because I know that's not easy.
And to become an inhabitant of the place versus dragging all your baggage with you and wrecking the joint.
Yeah. No, exactly. And there's a big difference. I think the latter is much more common, but you see folks who are actually like, okay, I'm going to inhabit this place and live this lifestyle. Yep. That's really cool. Yep. And they bring a lot of good stuff to these places.
Yeah. I've seen it. And I mean, I guess I moved into the West when I was 25.
That's awesome.
And I'd grown up in rural Alabama. Mm-hmm. So I knew how to hay, and I knew I could get a job.
Right, and I bet there's so many skills that translate too, coming from 100%, there up here.
100%. Also, the ability to work when it's really, really hot.
Oh, I wish I
other
had
people
that.
didn't have.
Oh, I don't have that. Yeah, I totally admit to that. That's amazing. Yeah.
So when so you moved. It's a fascinating story. Probably not to you because you lived it.
It's a messy story.
It's a messy
story. It bounces all over the place.
Right.
Yeah.
I wish I could think of this quote I used to carry in my wallet about touches of madness and non-linearity in life.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I'll have to find it.
Please do.
That wallet is gone, but I carried this quote forever. And my story is it's emblazoned with touches of madness and a profound non-linearity.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
So your non-linear world, you went into English and dressage, and you went to. You began to bounce around the world with that.
I began to bounce around the world. I was far enough. I'd kind of gone through at 17, basically gotten an associate's degree in high school, and could test out of all that I needed to. Yeah. And had the opportunity to go up to Calgary and work for a while. Okay. So I ended up at Calgary training with a gal named Bonnie Bonello, who was on the Canadian Olympic dressage team at that point. And Bonnie was instrumental in kind of helping me get a foothold in the international world. I think Calgary was my first trip out of the country anywhere.
You were how old?
17.
Yeah.
And going to Calgary and working, there's a big facility called Spruce Meadows in Calgary. That's the best show jumping facility in the world. It's where everyone comes. Uh-huh. So could go kind of soak in Spruce Meadows and learn that. And I started to see the business side of it. And then was really intrigued and actually got a job working in southern Sweden, helping train in young horses for stallion auction.
Through Spruce Meadows, like people you met there?
Through Bonnie.
Yeah.
Yeah, through that connection.
Yeah.
And so it was great. I got on a plane, went to southern Sweden, showed up. I had a place to stay and a car and was encountering like 4-lane roundabouts, which I'd never seen growing up in rural Montana.
Yeah.
It was quite the...
when you say southern Sweden, what is that? Is there a capital there? I've never been there.
The closest town was Malmo, which is like a university. Mm-hmm. So just kind of the southern, it's very pastoral, green, lush fields, southern part of the country.
Yeah. Is it still really far north? Like even when you're in southern Sweden,
pretty
is it
far
like
north? Yeah. I was in Swedish Lapland, far northern Sweden, 2 years ago for a job, and was shocked that it was the same country as what I had seen.
Really?
And I guess it's like that in the U.S. too. You see that diversity.
Sure.
But southern Sweden felt very like green fields, dairy cows, very lush and comfortable, which was nice.
How did you get by with the language?
Didn't speak it at all and still don't. Luckily, there were enough folks, kind of I fell in with a group of younger riders. We were all riding these horses in these stallion auctions. And many of them spoke English because they were in their late teens, early 20s.
Gotcha. So what's a stallion? So you're riding the stallions for the stallion auction?
Yeah, so it's this really interesting, it sounds bizarre.
It's great. Yeah.
It's great. It's this really interesting thing they do in Europe where they have auctions in big riding halls, and it is a coat and tie affair. There are guys in tuxedos and ladies in evening gowns. Everyone spreads out and sits, the buyers spread out and sit at special tables on the auction floor and have champagne and caviar. And it was a level of opulence I had never been exposed to.
Right.
And
rare in Columbia Falls.
Yeah, we don't really, Columbia Falls dressing up is like a nice pair of jeans. Maybe, and then they sit and bid hundreds of thousands of dollars up to, I rode a horse once that went for $800,000 in an auction, which I would, I don't come from money. I'd never be able to touch that. Yeah. But to be able to ride that horse and watch that side of the business was really intriguing because I thought, okay, I want in on this. Yeah. There's potential here. Yeah. And did that for a while and eventually burned out hard. I got really tired of seeing folks who could afford to spend $200,000 or $800,000 or $60,000 on a horse, but their riding skill set wasn't good enough to then uphold the level of that training on the horse. Mm-hmm. And they'd ride the horse for a year, things would start to fall apart, and then they'd just buy another one. And the ethics of that bothered me. Yeah. It was not fair to the horses. It was not a sustainable industry. Yeah. And I left. What had been, that was my career path since I was a child. Yeah. And I just burned out and I was like, all right, I'm done. I saw what I needed to do. I learned a lot. Yeah. Learned a lot about people and business, and then was just done. So, and this day I photograph equestrian events and I write occasionally. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Luckily I have a skill set now. I can go take camera jobs, photography jobs where I have to be on a horse with a camera, and that's I noticed there's a lot of that in your work. There is, and I'm surprised. I'm sought out for that because people are like, hey, we can put this girl on a horse for a week with 2 cameras and she probably won't die. Yeah. So it served me well in that regard. But for a long time I felt like, okay, I think I was 19 when I got out of that industry, and it felt like I wasted 19 years of my life wanting to do this one track. Mm-hmm. So it was an interesting burnout.
Were you traumatized by that?
Probably. I've never really thought about it.
You don't seem easily traumatized to me.
I struggle with the word traumatized. I think it took a while for me to wrap my head around it. Yeah. Did you go were you despondent about this loss of career path, or were you like, yeah, 100%. And I think a 19-year-old girl, you're despondent about a lot of things in life. Right. Things are real raw. Totally. Yeah. But instead of being despondent over the loss of like boyfriends or something, I was despondent over like, okay, this is my career path in my life. Right. But then it was also really exciting. Once I got over the, oh shit, what have I done? Yeah. I was like, okay, cool, what can I do? Drop this dream and let's find another one. Yeah, wow, exactly. That's cool. So it was definitely a period of soul searching of like, what do I want to do? Right. And what were you doing while soul searching? Was that when you were outdoor retailing? I was outdoor retailing. I was working at Sportsman's Warehouse in for a while in Bozeman, selling licenses at the front counter, and then I actually moved here to Missoula and was working at Sportsman's Warehouse here, working at Victoria's Secret here, and then still training horses on the side a bit.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, pretty much dead broke, making money in my early 20s.
Did you come to Missoula on purpose? Like when you came out of Sweden?
Well, for a while. So I actually got accepted to the university here. And I was really lucky. It was a full-ride scholarship. It looked great. And was going to double major in political science and Russian. Because one of my career paths when I got out of the equestrian field was, okay, I want to get into the intelligence field. And had always been intrigued by kind of the military and the intelligence communities. And thought, Rush is going to be an ongoing thing. Russian would be a good skill set to learn.
You're probably not going to go away as an adversary.
Yeah. That's a good thing to have.
And prove true.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Right.
And came here, did a week of school, and left. And I thought, I can't do this. I was so bored, had done what I had done.
Yeah.
I think it was a fun conversation with my parents, especially my mom, being an educator, saying, hey, guess what? I'm turning down this full-ride scholarship to go do something. I don't know what, but I know I can't sit in a classroom for 4 years.
Yeah. I'd have to say that was pretty astute, though.
It felt
a lot of people would.
I
know, but a lot of people would flounder into that and waste 4 more months, 8 more months, or 4 years,
right? Yeah,
just out of what do you? I don't know the word. Maybe stasis, like what's expected of you, and then you just like sit there.
Right, you just go check a box. And I do talk. I'm sure you do the same. I talk to so many folks, especially coming into the journalism field, who say, "Okay, I have a degree, and I have no idea what to do now."
Right,
and that's. There are some excellent journalism programs out there, but I'm surprised by the amount of kids I see coming out where it's like, hey, I've sat in a classroom for 4 years. Everything should be laid out for me.
Right. All contraire on that, Jane.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know when there's been a time with a journalism fascination or interest where you have to be more proactive and more quick on your feet and creative.
It's wild.
To make it. And you can. The opportunities are everywhere. But you can starve while going through the opportunities.
Yeah.
I got a call the other day from a friend of mine's son who is looking for something. It was a kind of a think tank research thing. He has a journalism degree.
Oh, interesting.
And I was going to research it to see who they were, and he was, that's the way he's jumping.
Right.
And it might work, being a researcher.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do it for 20 years and not put pen to paper, but.
Exactly. Yeah. But if you can do that and then do what you love on the side even, that's a way for him to kind of start getting his feet under him.
Yeah. Did you, so you, tell me what, we're going from Sportsman's Warehouse counter.
We're jumping all over.
Yeah, one of the things, I just did a podcast with my friend Malcolm Brooks.
Oh, awesome.
Who wrote Painted Horses.
Yeah.
And Malcolm was also, he was working the gun counter at Axman's.
Amazing.
For a long time.
I love that.
And there's some incredible guns in the novel.
Nice.
And so he got acquainted with a lot of those, like handling fine guns.
Absolutely.
As a retail guy.
Yeah. Well, that's my theory through my whole career. I'm 32 now, and I figured this out. I wish sooner. I figured this out in my mid-20s is no matter how weird the job, you pick up skills you're going to learn later in life. I'm kind of go around and cherry pick skills in different settings.
Yeah.
And it might not seem like it at the time. I'm sure it didn't for him when he was selling guns, but you use that stuff down the road.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you have to be ruthless enough to say, I've learned what I can from this. I got to move on.
Yes, it's hard.
I bet. Yeah. And it's also hard to. I mean, I did that working in the woods for years.
Oh, I bet.
And I did come to days. But you never know whether you're just exhausted or whether you've come to the end,
Totally. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of these things are not like standard ways to the top. I mean, if you're thin in timber, you're not you're not hunting for the CEO position.
Totally, yeah. Which is beautiful unto itself. It's
correct. There's a zen simplicity in just doing work at the retail counter or thin in timber. Yeah.
Totally. And I feel like I've never been more creative when I have those jobs because you're doing manual labor or you're doing minimally brain usage labor.
Yeah.
But your creative mind almost kind of wakes up and starts chewing on stuff.
Wow, that's interesting.
So it's fun. I do the same thing. I did it this morning. I was stuck on a story, and I got up at 5 a.m. and went for a hike, and just a couple hours on the trail, and it's like, oh, you kind of, don't set out thinking about it, but you work through stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I remember some people had done huge journalism stories. This woman, I can't remember who told me this, but she would work them out swimming.
Oh,
she would go to the indoor pool and just do laps.
Good for her.
And stop short of exhaustion, right?
Yeah.
Stop short of tired.
Yeah.
But work the thing out with absolutely no like a buoyancy, even you're not even on your feet.
Totally.
Yeah.
You're just in a whole different world.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to have to try that.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
Awesome.
So you jumped Missoula. How did you get the Russia connection?
So it's going to get really bouncy for a while. So I was in Missoula. Ended up going to Austin. I'm trying to remember where I moved after Missoula. No, I went back to Bozeman. Then I went to Austin for a while and worked. And it's been a couple great years in Austin. I actually fell in with some rock climbers there. And we go climb on the Greenbelt, working outdoor retail again. And started doing a bit more photography down there. And just kind of contracted and doing outdoor photography and playing. When I was in Missoula, I had scraped by on rice and beans with those 3 kind of weird mismatched jobs and bought my first DSLR.
I got you.
So I had a camera.
So you had an interest in that.
Yep,
Yeah.
I had an interest. After Missoula, I moved back to Bozeman, and actually my first national story, they were talking about putting a hydroelectric dam on Quake Lake, just outside of West Yellowstone. And I was 21 at that point, and I was like, this is my home turf. I like this lake, had some history with it, and I got pissed. I was just like, I don't want to see this place, which has so much history, get screwed up by this. And so I went, I think the only reason I was able to get an interview with the folks who were trying to put in the dam was they were like, oh, it's a 20-year-old girl, she's doing it for school or whatever.
How much harm could she do?
I never said, they never asked me, I never said what my intent was, but I was like, hey, can I talk with you about this? And pitched it to American Angler. And American Angler, bless their hearts, they were like, hey, sure, you research it, you get a photo of the site. So now I had a camera. I could go kind of sneak onto the proposed site, get a photo of it.
Wow.
And they published the article. And it was like a little front page, or front section,
short.
2 pages maybe.
Yep. That's pretty good.
But it was, that to me was like, oh, this can actually, I can do something with this that will make a difference. And that project was later turned down. And so it was a cool thing to be like, all right, I can combine the writing side, which I love, and combine the photography, which I liked but was fairly new.
Right.
Into something that together they were more powerful than the 2 separate pieces.
Yeah, for sure. Where you're already dabbling in becoming a multimedia.
Right.
Which is what it takes.
It does. Yeah. And that's forever a war with me. It's, are you a writer or photographer? And I'm like, both. I don't think I could ever just hang my hat on one or the other.
Yeah.
So started doing a bit of work with that. I did stories about the flows on the Madison, and just doing a tiny bit, like the barest level of investigative journalism for fisheries around Montana. Took that to Texas, started doing some of that.
Someday we'll have to discuss, someday I would love to get you in this too, is we definitely need a minimum in-stream flow law.
100%.
I mean,
yes, of course.
Was it Joe Gutkowski?
Yeah.
Won all that stuff. Do you know him at all? So somebody asked me if he's still alive. Is he?
I have no idea, actually.
He was a Budweiser Outdoorsman of the Year and toughest man alive, voted in Field and Stream. But he was a activist. He was like the roughest, like regular working dude, But he was an actual activist for a minimum in-stream flow law. Back.
Yeah, I've heard of him. I've never met him, but we need, that whole thing's a mess. The Madison's a mess as a whole right now in particular.
Yeah. And so you were, okay, so we won't go off that,
we can segue for hours.
That's a big one.
That's a big one. And that's not going away either.
Yeah. No, it's going to get hotter. Yeah. You were in Austin?
Yeah.
And I was trying to remember that great rock climbing they have out there, and that weird where the Comanche
did the Enchanted Rock.
It's Enchanted Rock.
Yeah. Yep.
Where the Comanche had a standoff with the proto Texas Rangers.
Yeah, long time. Yeah. But yeah, I was in Austin for a while. I was in San Antonio and San Marcos. I bumped around Texas a lot. And I like Texas. There's so much going on down there. I could see myself back there at some point.
Yeah. I think the lack of public lands is the main problem with it.
Exactly.
But the enormity of it, I had a dream once that I ended up in Alpine.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, not a bad
Just
place
because I liked it. I've been there one time,
Totally.
and it stuck in some part of my subconscious. Because it's so dramatic.
It's so dramatic, and it to me feels like those Zane Grey novels. Texas, I can drive through. I drove one of the times I was in Texas this spring. I drove down and going through Wyoming, Colorado, and then Texas. I was like, I could drive through Texas just in big loops for a long time and be pretty happy.
Yeah, and like you said, how could anything be more different than the Big Bend?
Yes.
And Harlingen.
Oh, totally.
And then I was in Navasota for a while researching a story of a book I never actually got a chance to do, which was about Frank Hamer, the original Texas Ranger.
Yeah.
And then Navasota, here you have something totally different.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's like it is its own country, as they say.
And you can go catfishing on the Brazos right there.
Definitely.
And like if you're a herpetology freak, there's every kind of snake and lizard.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And they change completely as you go out to the desert.
Totally.
I mean, I got you. I get it.
There's so much.
Yeah.
I have fondness for Texas for sure.
So then you found yourself in Russia.
So eventually I get to Russia. So I ended up.
You didn't take Russian at the University of Montana, and yet.
Definitely. So actually, I went from Texas to Washington, to Olympia, Washington, and spent a while working out at a fly shop in Gig Harbor. So on the Olympic Peninsula, and learned the tiniest bit about steelhead and kind of that realm. It's still, I don't know much about it still. I would like to learn more, but kind of.
Did you fish growing up around Columbia Falls?
I did.
Yeah.
I was lucky. One of my earliest memories is like we had a wooden drift boat. My dad built us a couple wooden drift boats as a kid, and hiding up under the casting platform in a rainstorm making a fort. So I grew up in drift boats and.
Gotcha. On the Flathead.
I was lucky on the Flathead, and actually learned to rowboat on the South Fork of the Snake outside of, before Jackson became what Jackson is today.
Yeah, for sure.
Like flowing down from Dead Man's on out was one of my favorite stretches as a kid. So I was really lucky. I grew up with a fly rod in hand, and then got away from it during the horse years. Yeah, largely. I still would pick it up a bit. But ended up in Washington. Was in Washington. Went back to Texas for a while for a job or something. And then ended up in Russia. I got offered a job to be the assistant manager at the Pnoy River Company, which is kind of up near Murmansk. Okay. That weird thumb of Russia that sticks off of Finland. So everyone thinks Russia fly fishing. We all think Kamchatka. Yeah. And for good reason.
Right. That was the first thing I asked you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've never been, but it's high on my list. But this part of Russia, you're still far above the Arctic Circle, but it's Murmansk region, which is really militarized because Polyarny is where the northern fleet of the Russian Navy is. So it's all like the Hunt for Red October starts at Polyarny. Gotcha. That's the initial scene. Yeah. So it's a very militarized old school town. Instead of a clock tower downtown, they have a Geiger counter or whatever the giant version of a Geiger counter that measures town radiation would be. Wow. So it's not a place tourists go. Yeah. But it was really a good job to come in, and I was managing an international guide team and learning enough Russian to tell helicopters to land on this pad and not that pad. And it was logistics work. I wasn't guiding. I would have liked to have been guiding, I think, but it was really invaluable to be in that position of like you're running a camp in the middle of a tundra. We were 2.5 hours flight from the nearest town. So you're out there. Yeah.
And if there's no flight, are there any people that make those trips? Like they're reindeer or?
So no, there are the Sami people are kind of the resident folks. And there's a lot of controversy between like the Russian military and the Sami people. And they cross the border into Finland. They drive the reindeer across. So when we were there, they had already driven reindeer out of that area and gone to kind of summer pastures. Yeah. But you would see like abandoned Sami huts. It's one time we packed up a bunch of gear and went on a picnic to one and showed up, and you walk inside and it's this little hut with a bunch of porn hung on the wall and a bunch of reindeer hides, and we had lunch and made a fire and then cleaned up and left. So there's signs of habitation here and there. But
and it's seasonal.
It is.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I would love to someday do a story on the Sami people.
I think that would be awesome. My head's full of unanswered questions like what you're talking right now.
Absolutely. And I learned a little bit. We had a couple guys on the guide team who were they weren't Sami herders per se, but they were from that region of Russia.
Yeah.
And just talking with them, we would use Google Translate on the phones until I picked up enough Russian. They didn't really speak English.
Yeah.
And just sit there like typing into our phones and then turning around and showing each other on the phone. So it was...
Holy smokes, that's wild.
It was interesting.
What a world.
What a world. And it's...
What do the Sami speak?
I don't know. There's got to be some sub-dialect.
Sure.
I have no idea, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm kind of ashamed. I should know. But yeah.
Well, you didn't run into them. They were gone.
Exactly. They were gone, and I didn't have enough interaction there. But it's a hell of a place up there because it's just big, flat tundra with these huge rivers with hordes of Atlantic salmon. I mean, these
so
fish
unreal.
It drove such a respect for these fish into me. And just for the lifestyle because it's a very hard place up there.
And you were saying it's far enough north to stay light up 24 hours?
Definitely. So we would do the dumb thing of get the guests to bed whenever they stopped partying at like midnight or 1 or something. Then we'd hop in the boats and go fish.
I was going to ask you if you got a chance to fish.
Yeah, I got a chance to fish, and I'm still terrible with the spay rod, but at least was able to pick it up enough to get into fish.
I was going to ask you what they use.
Yeah.
They throw the spay rod mostly?
I had never seen like the big old kind of Nordic style huge spay rods.
Wow.
But some of these Russian guys are poetry to watch them. I mean, I have photos that I was looking at them last week for a story and just kind of stopped on one and was like, how do they do that?
Yeah.
It's poetry in motion.
Did you take a lot of photos when you were doing that, or were you too busy?
Both. I took a lot. I kind of brought the camera wherever I went. So I have a lot of weird photos of like us doing supply runs in helicopters and us doing it's stirred an interesting creative kind of angle in me because I wanted to be that person on the ground getting the behind the scenes stuff you don't get if you're visiting for a week.
Yeah.
And a lot of those photos I never would have gotten if I wasn't up at 4 a.m. lighting fires in guest tents, or if I was on the supply helicopter that had a rough ride, or it's different little strange moments.
Yeah.
But it's very much the long-term documentary work that I got into this field for that is incredibly hard to find now.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing a job, some other job outside of photography, I couldn't have gone there and spent 6 months just shooting photos.
Right. You had to do the work.
Totally. Had to do the work and had to I didn't sleep for days on end because we'd be fishing and get sick and go through all this stuff. But it's incredible. I would never not have done it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've often wondered, balanced out, like whether hunger, like you gotta have a job, right? And so it leads you into some of the coolest stuff that I've ever done.
Absolutely.
Has been because I was completely out of money and I had to get a job.
Yep.
Some of those jobs were awful. And really didn't give me much back,
Oh, totally.
Although some funny stories.
Yep. And you learn something.
You do. But I was like in your life, had you been those folks that bought the $800,000 horse or whatever?
No.
You probably wouldn't have done this.
Yeah, exactly.
You wouldn't have been in Russia.
No, and I wouldn't have seen that. And
or you would have been a client.
Right, I would have been a client paying $15,000 to come in and be catered to.
Yeah.
And catch a line, which would be great. I still can't do that now, and I would love to do that.
Right.
But honestly, having visited enough places through work, and gone in and been on kind of the production side of it.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I took a trip just to go take a trip. I didn't have a camera in hand, and I don't know if I'd know what to do with myself. I like being busy, and I like coming in and saying, okay, this is my narrative and my job here.
Yeah.
I feel kind of lost without that.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a bad thing. I have trouble just going and relaxing.
I doubt it. I think it's just your walk in life. I have a good buddy who's a writer who told me, I can't remember how they won this trip or something. They were in Baja.
Nice.
And that's what you think, and he said, and they would bring these 6 Coronas in a bucket full of ice and sit it by your chair.
Oh, gee.
And I said, that sounds incredible. And he goes, nah, it wasn't.
Really?
He said, I only made it like for the first morning, and then he said, I don't want to drink in the daytime when I'm in Baja.
Right.
I want to go fishing. I want to go to the mountains,
Good for him.
But he said, I said, wow, that's what's not to like about that? And he was like, he's kind of sheepish,
No.
And he goes, well, I hated it.
No, well, good for him. He knows what he likes, though,
You can't sit there in a chair when you're 1,200 miles from home.
Totally.
You got to get up.
There's stuff to see and do, and same. You got to get up. I love that.
I can drink 6 Coronas at home, like real quick.
So I can do that on the plane.
Right.
Yeah.
So did the Russia thing turn out? Like, was that a decent job? It was obviously very interesting.
Yeah, it was a decent job. There were a lot of rough moments. It took 2 months before the staff kind of decided I was okay. I was an American, which was a big strike against me, and I was a woman, which was a bigger strike. And
you said there was only 2 women in that camp?
Yeah. And I still remember the day the guys did tea every day. You know, it's a culture where you have tea. And that was kind of, the guides would be out with guests, and we had a whole fleet of folks, a lot of them fresh out of the military, who were mechanics and, you know.
This is Russian military?
Guys. Yeah. So a lot of guys, very rough guys. You know, you'd see them in a bar and be like, ugh. But the best guys, just gentlemen. The best guys, once you get to know them. And I would go sit in on their tea. And they'd all meet in this little hut and have tea in exchange, like, hey, this boat motor's broken, this tent's leaking, let's fix it. And I would just show up, and the tent would go silent. And it was like, oh, shit, the American, you know, she's here. And it was the most uncomfortable, I was 25, the most uncomfortable thing.
Yeah.
And it took 2 months of that. And I was just probably too stubborn. I just kept showing up before they were like, okay, you're a Russian girl. And then all of a sudden I was in. And it was like I had a team of big brothers, and we would gamble and drink and do, you know, just go fish together and hang out.
Yeah. Do they drink as hard as anybody in the world, or is that
3 meals a day?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had vodka 3 meals a day, which I enjoy a drink. I don't drink a ton, so that took some acclimatizing.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to hang with them. That's a thing. Is if you can't drink with them, then you're never gonna.
You're not in the club.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
It's more so than any culture I've ever seen.
Right. I think Anthony Bourdain at one time had said he had to stop going. He was doing jiu-jitsu and all that stuff. He was in this health phase of his life. He was like 58 years old.
Good for him.
And he had to stop, but he had to stop going to those countries where he had lots of friends.
Right.
But he said, I can't. He said, it is what you do, and I don't want to do it anymore.
It's so hard on your body. I'm sure I took years off of life doing that.
Just drinking white liquor.
Yeah, drink white liquor. And then it's, there's a whole history of like nuclear dumping on the Kola Peninsula, that part of Russia, because the North Fleet's there, and they just, for a long time, would just dump stuff. So I'm sure all the water we were drinking and stuff, there's a reason Murmansk is a Geiger counter.
Gotcha.
So I'm sure there's, I did not do myself any favors.
Right.
But it was so worth it. And once I was in and part of the club, it was the best thing ever. These guys, they looked after me. We'd go into Murmansk at the end of the season, and I still remember sitting in a bar. We had been on the tundra for months, and sitting in a bar in Murmansk at a hotel, nothing fancy, and all having coffee and vodka, like you do. And all of a sudden, these guys, it was like in a movie, these guys all in black walk in with very obviously prostitutes. And my guys looked at me and like, okay, we're leaving. And they threw money on the table. And like, as soon as these guys, these Russian gangsters walked in, you leave.
Yep.
And so I was very fortunate to have them to kind of
guide you.
Guide me. Teach me the ways of Murmansk.
Right.
You know.
Right. Well, I know. I read that book, Bill Browder. It's called Red Notice.
Oh, I haven't read it.
And well, it's good.
Nice.
He was over there. He bought the Murmansk fishing fleet when he worked for Goldman Sachs. I'm not sure it was Goldman Sachs. He worked for an investment firm right after the fall of the wall.
Oh, gee.
And of course, over time, that didn't. The Russian people, oligarchs, came to somewhat resent
I am sure.
Bill Browder being over there buying their stuff at like negative pennies on the dollar.
Oh, it's so political.
And it went very badly, right? And that's what the book's about.
Oh, I'll have to read it.
You'd like it because of that. And I highly recommend the book, although I don't think my takeaway was my takeaway was, this is pure outlawry.
Right. It's Russia.
And you finally run into somebody who has like a baseball bat.
Oh, gee.
And you're still filling out the forms.
Yep.
And I just didn't. I'm a great believer in natural power dynamics, and
absolutely.
And it's wonderful to fill out forms and have the rule of law and stuff like that. But when somebody does show up with a baseball bat, you have to understand that that's not going to work.
That's superseded.
And it seemed to take him a long time to catch on to that idea coming from the U.S.
Right.
Or London. I can't remember which it was.
We're a paperwork culture.
Yeah. And that all goes. The book actually hinges on that Murmansk fleet.
It's I'd love to go back. I remember end of the season getting on a plane, and they would not let me on the plane without a cash bribe. That was the first bribe I've had to pay out traveling. It's like, all right, you're physically not getting on the plane unless you pay us money.
Right.
And this is the gate agent at the airport.
Yeah.
So that culture is just, you can never let your guard down, which is a healthy thing, I think, to some extent.
It is. I would hate to live it day by day here in this country.
Exactly.
It feels really relaxing to me not to live in that.
Yes.
But I had a wonderful time one time crossing the border from Mexico to Guatemala.
Oh.
And we had been drinking and up in northern Mexico, and I forgot to get a tourist card.
Oh, no.
And they're like, you can't leave Mexico.
Right.
You got to go back. What is it? It's thousands of miles, right?
Yeah, no way.
And I finally was like, could I just buy us a bunch of beer and let's talk about this?
That's amazing.
And one of the soldiers goes, yeah. And we did. And they had tourist cards,
Oh, of course.
It was great. It was actually
great.
It worked out great.
That's awesome.
And they were very nice.
Really good.
And they were just sitting there waiting for me to catch on. We
need some cervezas. Then get a conversation going.
And smoke a cigarette. It was like we were going to have some camaraderie,
right?
Because we're going to work this out.
Oh, that's so awesome.
And at first, I was just devastated.
Right.
I was thinking about all that. The bus ride is, epic, as you know.
Yeah, that's not something you want to repeat willingly. Good on you, though. You
it worked.
Got there.
I was like 19.
Nice.
Took me a while,
Yeah.
But so when you came back from there, you didn't. You brought that to an end at some point.
Yeah.
You didn't go back.
Nope. Brought that to an end. Came back to Seattle, I guess. Was in Seattle for a while. Went back to Austin for a while. Kind of bounced around, and then actually got scooped up by Orvis, and moved up to Vermont to work with Orvis. They hired me.
Wow.
It was a big change.
I don't know this story at all.
Yeah, I swear I would never have a desk job. And a guy named Paul Fierson, who is in my top 5 list of human beings I've ever known. He's the coolest guy. Hired me after a phone call. I had never had a job writing professionally. He was like, "Yeah, I want you to come be the outdoor writer for Orvis," which is hunt, fish, and travel, and kind of core to the Orvis brand. I mean, it's a company that's been around since 1856.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It was big shoes, and Paul had my job. So it was really interesting coming in and
Can I ask you, how do you find them? Or how did they find you?
The web, I think. Yeah, I think it was just like a job listing. And I think I applied just kind of as like, it's something to do with fishing. I thought I could learn a lot with the history of the company and the travel aspect.
Yeah.
And I think I applied kind of on a whim, not knowing what my next move would be.
Yeah.
Never, ever dreamed of living in the Northeast. I'm a Montana kid, and the Northeast is kind of an anathema.
Yeah.
But yeah, Paul hired me, moved up January, actually drove up in Winter Storm Hercules through the Northeast from Austin, ended up in Vermont, and worked for a couple of years with them. And it was an education.
Boy,
Paul
I bet.
was the best writer I've ever had the pleasure of working with. It was kind of the Norman McLean half again as long. And I was writing everything from catalog copy to editorial. We rebranded fishing at that point in time. It kind of went from the tweed and vest look to the beginning of what Orvis fishing is now, a bit younger and a bit hipper.
Yep. That's interesting.
Which is fascinating. You can appreciate, like as a writer, it's a very difficult, especially in a family-owned company, it's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
But I learned so much. It was like going to college. It was my college experience essentially, but in a job.
Yeah.
And Paul was the best because he would kind of say, "Hey, I'm gonna fly at 30,000 feet and help you fight the battles where you need it, but otherwise, figure it out, kid." And it was invaluable. It was so much fun.
Were you a pretty clear writer at that point?
I thought I was.
So
I don't think I was.
You had done some time at the Pinedale Roundup.
That's right.
So tell me that. This is flying way back. Yeah.
Gosh, this was after, I forget these things. Everything happened in a short amount of time. After I came back from Russia, flew back to Seattle. After Seattle, I guess I came back to Bozeman, went back to Sportsman's Warehouse for a month, and then got a job as a reporter at the Pinedale Roundup.
Gotcha.
So I moved to rural Wyoming.
Did you find that online?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a National Press Photographers Association job board or something. They housed all of us reporters. I made $17,000 a year.
Yep.
They housed all of us in an old vestry, essentially. Like I was living with 4 dudes in a tiny building, making zero money, and had wolves, wildfires, and something. And of course, you journal assignment, you do a bit of everything, but I was able to specialize in some stuff that really mattered to me.
Yeah.
And that was a good experience, just to have to write stories I absolutely had zero interest
and exactly. And turn them around on deadline, like right now.
Totally. And winter in Pinedale is an experience I would wish on no one. I took the job in October, and the house didn't have heat. We had one wood-burning stove in the front room, and I lived in the back of the house. And I mean, that's Wyoming, like that's high country.
I know that place, and I did some reporting there on the gas fields in the winter, and then I was back and forth in the winter, and then I was there in March once, where in Montana, the winter had turned, and I loaded up a rental car, and I ended up in Pinedale doing the Green River.
Right,
and it was the coldest. It was one of the coldest places that I've ever been.
Yep. A little Bondurant, which is a little town near there. Yeah, that I think is fairly, that and like West Yellowstone vie for the coldest spots in the nation often. And it's a cool little town, but again, would not wish winter there on
it's a tough
anyone.
One. Yeah, it's a tough one. Did you ever know when you were there the Skinner brothers?
No.
At all? So Courtney Skinner, they had Skinner Brothers Outfitting.
Okay.
And Courtney befriended me while I was doing some stories down there.
Nice.
He's not anti-gas development at all, but he didn't like the impact. It was too much.
Yeah.
And his brother actually was very pro-industry, and they kind of were at odds on this thing. But Courtney showed me around, and I don't know where he is now. He was pretty old, but he did all these Antarctic expeditions. He and his brother, they were like logistics teams.
Yeah.
And I said one time, how did you learn to do that? And then he said, well, feeding cows in Pinedale is not that different than what we were doing on this Antarctic.
That's amazing.
And it was and I know he said that, but explained it before like that.
Sure.
But he wasn't kidding.
Wow.
He just said, well, what we did ranching in Pinedale as growing up.
Right.
He said it's pretty much the same.
Good training for Antarctica.
Yeah, it's traveling for Antarctica.
Boy.
Yeah. But that's cool. So did you spend a summer there too?
No. So I was like October through
You just got the
April.
best part.
I just got the best part. I would love to go back. I've driven through Pinedale, but I've never gone back and actually spent proper summer. I would love to.
Well, the reason the trappers and the mountain men held the rendezvous in Daniel. You know, when you go there in the summer,
it's story.
You go like, there it is. That's why it was the center of their world.
I have to get back there. Yeah.
And I imagine they didn't spend much time in there in the winter.
Not much to do for
them. The wind blows so hard it clears the grass.
Yeah.
And so the grazing for buffalo and horses and stuff was still there.
Definitely.
Which is not true down there at Daniel. If you look at the snow's like 8 feet
ridiculous. Deep. You're tunneling through it.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of an interesting interlude, huh?
Yeah. So that, and I the other day, a couple months ago, I printed out a map of the world and actually mapped out like, okay, I was born here, and then drew lines to every move, and I kept forgetting stuff like this. I kept going, oh yeah, I did 3 months there, I did 2 months there. So it's a hell of a thing to try and keep track of.
Yeah, which is kind of a neat thing to be able to say.
I like it.
Yeah, if that's what you want.
100%. I've been here in Missoula now for 2 years, and actually had a bit of a panic the other day. I had an editor email me, and he said, hey, I know you. I need to send you a check. What's your new address? And I said, what have you got? And he had my current Missoula address, and I thought, oh, shit, it's been 2 years. Like he has a current address, and that's the first time that's happened.
Yeah.
So it's weird having a bit of a home base.
Yeah. How did you do that for years? Did you have did they mail to your parents, or did you have a forwarding address? Or?
Both.
Yeah.
Like when I was overseas, I'd mail go to parents and stuff. And if I was really hopping around, I would do that.
Yeah.
Even some to my brother. I have a brother who lives in Livingston. So he was close enough to many of these places where he could kind of gather stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, the post office hates me, I'm sure, because I'm forever like, hold my mail, forward my mail, please do this, please do that.
And then whole big boxes of old canceled receipts and bills. And
yeah. Luckily, with everything much of it being digital now, that makes it a lot easier even than it was 8 years ago, 5 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've got mostly like transfers. It's a great thing. It's better.
It is.
It's
so
better
much better
than it was.
Yeah. Technology. There's one good thing of technology.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's better than it was. I can remember I used to make a cartoon of myself like staring at the mailbox.
Oh no.
Like you're getting skinnier and skinnier.
Yeah.
And the check never comes. And you call and they say, "Oh, that's in our what is it? Accounts and receivable department."
Yes.
And she's gone. she's on vacation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No,
and they go, and then you finally get somebody in there and they go, well, he was supposed to bring that. Yeah. And you're just sitting there like weeping.
Right.
By the time you get it, you just pass it out like Monopoly money.
Totally.
And you're broke
gone.
again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's spoken for.
I'm happy with the digital transfer.
It helps so much. And being able to do it on like a phone even is so good.
You use Venmo?
I don't.
I don't either, but I'd like to.
I'd like to, but I guess I'm old-fashioned enough. I literally just put like Wells Fargo on my phone a couple months ago because I'm old school enough. I like stuff analog. I figure the more I still don't do Snapchat. I don't do a lot of the stuff. The more that's on my phone, the more they can track me. We're already imminently trackable, but I like my privacy as much as I can have it.
Right.
So,
and I'm not trackable yet because I don't have a phone.
Good for you.
Well, no, I'm getting one because how do you live? How do you live without it?
That's true.
That's
true.
I mean, I was the much vaunted like Luddite life.
I love that. Yeah.
I have the flip phone and everything, and people think it's funny,
Right.
But the truth is like when I'm traveling, I have to rely on other people for Google Maps.
That's annoying.
Yeah. And this job I have with the sagebrush restoration with Mule Deer Foundation, the BLM actually has to come and show me the maps on a life-proof case with an iPad in it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And that's not really kosher. And that's not their job to show me where I'm supposed to put my crew.
Right.
So I have to update.
Oh, it's gonna be a whole new world for good and bad.
For good and bad. Yeah.
Dang.
My daughter made fun of me the other day. She goes, "Well, you spend as much time sitting there in front of that computer as I spend looking at my phone."
Oh, there you go.
And I was like, and she goes, "At least I can free to walk around."
Do laps.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. I've been surprised, especially going internationally, what an invaluable tool it is. Even if I can just tap into Wi-Fi somewhere and kind of send out like a quick message, hey, I'm here, I'm with these people, or, talk to, it's nice to have it. It's not only, I never depend on it, but when it works, it's nice to have it. Yeah.
I mean, journalism-wise, if I have like some cash, a credit card, and a passport, I'm totally relaxed.
Totally.
Yeah.
You gotta have I carry my passport everywhere. You gotta have it with you.
But now the phone is like it's like when we called you to tell you where this room was.
Exactly.
I mean, it's great.
So easy. Yeah.
Otherwise, I would have had to get up and walk all the way out there.
Look for me in the parking lot.
Yeah. Hey, this is Hal Herring, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Podcast and Blast. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. They asked me to call out for membership, looking for new members, looking for people that want to join up, have a good time, and fight for America's public lands. This is a good time to do it. It's $35 a year. For that, you get a $25 t-shirt. You can check that out, backcountryhunters.org/BHA podcast. Backcountryhunters.org/BHA podcast will show you what we got, what we're offering. And part of that is beyond the t-shirt, you get a subscription to Backcountry Journal, which is one of the better magazines coming out on hunting and fishing on public lands in America right now. It's beautiful writing, beautiful photos. And partially also you can see that membership at BHA is part of a powerful movement that's necessary, but it's also part of having a really good time with people like mine. Go to backcountryhunters.org/BHA podcast. Check it out and join us if you can. We're going to have a good time, and we have been having a good time, and we're going to have a lot more of it. Come on in. See ya. At what point did you decide, so you're back from Pinedale, you get the Orvis job. So all of this is kind of an apprenticeship to what you're doing now.
Yeah, more or less.
I mean, you had to write copy, you had to write on deadline AP style.
Totally. Had to kind of learn all this, like I was talking earlier, cherry picking skill sets from different things and learning by doing.
Yeah.
And then I started, when I was in Vermont with Orvis, I started to get a few international photography jobs. Costa Sunglasses sent me down to French Polynesia for kind of a expeditionary, checking out Anna Atoll, which is a place that's now becoming more popular for anglers.
Wow. What do they catch?
Mostly bonefish, bluefin trevally, giant trevally, kind of the South Pacific.
The GTs.
The fun stuff.
Yeah.
So they sent me down there to shoot like a year's worth of collection, which for me, I was kind of like, oh shit, I can't screw this up. I had not worked in I'd been to Belize. I'd shot a bit of stuff there for Orvis, but I had not worked in like South Pacific saltwater.
Yeah.
So it was an education in terms of how do I take care of myself and my gear.
Right. And so how did you get approached to do that? Because you were working at Orvis?
No, they saw Peace of Mind. So all throughout, I guess, all these years, I was working freelance for fishing magazines. Essentially, as I went and saw good stories, I would write bits and pieces for Fly Fish Journal and American Angler and all the good publications we know and love, some of whom have died in the past few months, sadly. Yeah. But they had actually, the ad agency for Costa had seen a piece I'd written on Russia and the Drake, I think.
Gotcha.
So they saw that, and it was a one piece, I think it was a sepia-toned photo of a couple of the guys exhausted in a helicopter. Like, it was one of those, I never would have had the photo if I wasn't working there. And they were like, oh, this is a different style. We like this. And called me up. I was actually on a shoot in Montana for Orvis. And I remember getting the phone call. I was in the parking lot with REI in Bozeman. And they said, hey, this is so-and-so. We represent Costa. We want to send you to the South Pacific. And I just remember thinking, they have the wrong person. There's no way.
Gotcha.
But long story short, we ended up doing the shoot. It was amazing. The client was fantastic. We were there for about a week. And on the last day, they said, okay, you're leaving the camera in the boat and you're fishing. And put a flower out in my hand. And I will forever be extremely grateful for those clients who make sure I get to fish in these places. Because you're everywhere in the world. When else are you going to be on an unexplored island in the South Pacific?
Right.
And it was a great shoot. My feet got cut on coral, and I lost both my big toenails and came back. My feet on the flight home were so swollen and infected. This is gross. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, this is what we're looking for, though.
It's the
this
reality.
Is what happens, right?
No,
this is it.
The reality of the job. They were so swollen and infected. They wouldn't fit in flip-flops. So I was that person walking barefoot through LAX holding flip-flops.
Wow.
But I was so elated because the shoot was done and it had been executed. I was happy with it. Yeah. That I was like, I don't care. My feet will heal at some point. My toenails will come back.
Yeah, at some point I'm going to go home and I'm going to put these up.
Yeah, but it was wrong. I just remember that whole flight back and many days getting back to Vermont, just being on air. Okay, this is what I want to do. This makes sense.
Yeah. When you were doing the shorter pieces, like for Drake and everything, there's a few bucks in there, but you'd had to have been employed to keep doing that.
Yeah, had to be. You know how it is. Editorial is. Yeah. I don't think, kudos to anyone who makes a living just on editorial. I've personally always had to have the commercial side, just to keep me. If I have the income from the commercial side of things, my brain is not worrying about making a living as much. It still very much is, but not as much. And then I have that kind of creative brain space to do the good stuff. So it's
very hard to be creative when the bills are due and you don't have any money to pay them.
Exactly.
I mean, I have been paralyzed by that, and it's such a weird catch-22.
It is. It's terrible.
Because it stops you from being able to think clearly about how to solve the problem.
100%.
Because the problem is in your face like somebody punching you with a pair of boxing gloves.
And it's not going to, the more you ignore it, the worse it's going to get. Yeah. It's not going to go away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I recommend, I could have done better with a better trade, but then I don't know if I'd have been hungry enough to do all the stories. It's like we go back to that
balance.
Same thing.
Yeah. I forever, as ignominious as it was at the time, I forever will never regret having these tiny little jobs, W-2 jobs is what I think of them as. I'm making $10 an hour, $12 an hour, but that gives me the brain space to be able to do what I like.
Yeah, and plan.
Yeah, and it's a balance. It's, of course, ideal world, we'd all be doing the fun, creative, sexy stuff all the time.
Right. But then would it be fun, creative, and sexy?
Exactly.
No, I mean, it might not work.
Yep, it's that balance, for sure. And I think it's different for every person, too.
Yeah. So when you were fishing down there, what are those, 10 weights?
Yeah,
12 weights?
10 and 12 weights. And I've been back to the South Pacific a few times. I did a shoot in Samoa for Yeti a couple years ago. Went down for that, and saltwater's still novel enough to me. Yeah. I've been able to do it a bit in the Caribbean and South Pacific and Australia, but it's so much fun. I feel like a little kid going on to candy store every time. We're just this rod is double the weight of what I grew up on. Yep. And who knows what's in here? I mean, you have no idea what's in there.
Or what you're going to see next.
Yeah. It's the best. best feeling.
Yeah, I would love to see some of that.
That's
I've never
so
been
fun.
to any of that. I've just been, we did a podcast in New Zealand.
Oh, how was that?
With this guy. It was cool. This guy's a hunter and he travels.
Awesome.
His name's Dave Burns. And it was really cool.
Oh,
and I was thinking of, my mind was just flipping through. Like, I started getting on the internet and looking at all the weird fish.
Absolutely.
That they catch bottom fishing, too.
Yeah.
Off the Australian coast.
There's so much.
Like meat fishing.
Yeah.
For these, like, brilliant orange creatures.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And there's a whole culture there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was in Australia last October and November. I was on a shoot doing a partnership with Tourism Australia and started up on the top end of Australia in the Kimberley region. So it's kind of Darwin, up on the Timor Sea, and was in this camp, and we'd gotten fish, and ridiculous. One morning we were out, and within, I don't know, an hour of being out, we had like queenfish, GTs, sharks, mackerel, all this stuff where it was just we were there at the right time, right place.
Yeah.
But they're all like unicorns, because that's something, I mean, in Montana, trout are amazing, but you do burn out on trout eventually.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm super intrigued with Australia. I went down to Tasmania after I was in the saltwater and did trout fishing in Tasmania, and I've been really lucky. I fished trout a lot of places around the world. That was hands down the best trout fishing I've seen ever.
What's it like?
It varies. So they have kind of lowlands, midlands, and highlands. And the highlands is like a big pompous like plateau. Yeah. Midlands are kind of jungly. Yeah. And then the lowlands are almost like southern Sweden. It's pastoral with sheep and cows and green fields.
And still good fishing.
Amazing fishing.
Yeah.
So the famous brown trout out of New Zealand actually came from Tasmanian stock.
Gotcha.
Is the story. And Tasmania, I found out, sells 300 international fishing licenses a year is all. Uh-huh. So it's a local fishery. Yeah. You know, they figure about 100 of those licenses go to Americans. So the traffic there is so low. Yeah. And there's so much wild space.
Is there a lot of demand for it, or is it just off the beaten track enough?
Just off the beaten track enough. It's not the easiest to, even pre-COVID, it's not the easiest to get to. Right. But amazing. I mean, it's amazing.
When I was very young and traveling a lot around Latin America stuff, there was these Euro people, and some of them were Israelis, and they would live in kibbutz, and where you don't have to pay, you just work, and then they all went to Tasmania for the apple harvest.
Oh, interesting! And go work.
Yeah, and they would go, and they had sort of a loose coalition of these Euro wanderers, right? And Tasmania was one of the places, one place in Israel, and then Tasmania was a place where they would all meet.
That's awesome.
And they said that the demand for labor in the apple harvest was you got like automatic work permit or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and what a good place to go work for several months. Probably for them. Yeah.
And so that guy Dave Burns is actually in mainland Australia. He does some of the hunting in New Zealand, but I'm so ignorant, Jess. Like I was just like my geography. I had to pull up a map and stuff.
Totally.
I just had no idea, even climatically.
Yep, it's way down there. Yeah, yeah. Well, and I was really surprised seeing Australia. I mean, the top end was tropical hot. Yeah. South Pacific-y. Yeah. And then Tasmania felt like Montana or South America. Yeah, right. You know, it's, I guess, again, like we were saying with the U.S., the regionality to these huge countries is fascinating. And
so when you're fishing Tasmania, is there any other kind of trout other than browns?
Some rainbows, but rainbows are viewed kind of as an invasive down there. So it's very much, I spent a day with the Inland Fisheries Service, who are the coolest guys. I was extremely impressed with their fisheries management and the way they've dealt. They've had a invasive carp issue, and they've actually eradicated carp in a lake. I mean, you can appreciate how difficult that is. Sure. Super cool guys, and they're just kind of like, these damn rainbow trout. You know, it's really an interesting, and they're valuable. Obviously, we see here in Montana as sport fish, but the browns there are the fish.
That's the fish. Yeah. Wow. And do these rivers go out into the ocean?
Yep.
So are there any other like anadromous fish that run up it, or the browns go to the salt?
You know, apparently I was in Tasmania, I think 4 days or 5 days. So I did a couple days of Lake Lowland stuff and then bumped up to the highlands. Wow. So part of my urge to get back there is I saw so little. Yeah. And Tasmania is not that big of an island. Right. But I saw so little of what was there. Gotcha. That I'm I'm literally like ooching forward in my seat. I really want to get on the plane and get back down.
Gotcha.
It's amazing. And super cool people. Like, there are very few places that I usually travel by myself, and there are a few places where I don't feel like I have to kind of watch my back. Because I'm a gal by myself with a lot of expensive camera gear hanging off me. It's not a good combo. Yeah. And Tasmania was super relaxed. Yeah. It was great.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do they speak like an Australian accent, or
they do?
Yeah. Do they have their own accent in Tasmania?
Tasmania, to me, and this is to my very inexperienced American ear, sounded much more kind of posh Australian, or it was a bit clearer. On the top end of Australia, it was much more kind of the Australia we think of in the movies. Yeah, you know, it was Crocodile Dundee. Like I was bush. Bush Australia, and I was in Kununurra, which is a rough little industrial town, for a night, and went to a bar, and everyone was speaking English, but it took me a lot of focus to understand what was being said. Which was great. It was so much fun to just walk into a bar in a small town and meet people. But definitely needed, and just the different sayings, you know, and the phraseology down there is so different. It was awesome. Some of the best people. Australia is the one country I think I would move to in a heartbeat if I had to go at it. Yeah, I
can imagine that too. Just, I mean, I've been in the mountains now for 30 years.
Nice.
And I've been thinking about like the ocean, and that's it's an unlived life for me. Like, I loved the ocean when I was young.
Absolutely.
And I have spent very little time there because, you know, I've kind of been absorbed by the West, right? And the West, you could do this for the rest of your life in 10 more lifetimes, and you wouldn't get it, half of it. But the ocean, like I watched this weird documentary of these surfers. They were like gangster outlaws, and they were in some city. They were like really poor, but they all surfed.
Awesome.
And it was like the course of their lives. It's really interesting. I can't remember the name of it. Okay. But they did all kind of cool stuff, like cool. Cliff diving and cave diving, and they were subsistence. They caught fish because they really didn't have much money.
Right. But you can do that on the, and I guess in the mountains we can hunt, and you
do. Yeah. But it's what you know is never as fun as what you think.
Exactly. No, and it's true. And what you said about kind of the unlived lives, I'm kept up at night, kind of with the weight of these unlived lives. Of like, okay, what if I had stayed more seasons in Russia, or what if I had done this or that? And it's so easy to get in our heads of okay, the what ifs. But it's fun to think about. You know.
Patrick Hemingway, one time I met him, and he told me that he stayed too long in Africa.
Really?
There was so he lived the life.
Yeah.
You know, he said I spent a little bit too long, and so you could like spend too long in Russia until it became the norm or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't. The one thing that's true. In the Rockies, I just did that long trip.
Right.
And I'd never done anything like that. And so it's like, it continues to blow my mind as I go.
Absolutely.
You know, through the Rocky Mountains. And then you could go to Canada.
Oh, there's so much.
To Lake Louise and north.
Yep.
I mean,
And like you said, you could spend a lifetime here and doing trips, like your trip sounded amazing. Doing trips like that where you could live a lifetime here and never touch that. And there are so many other places you could never touch.
Did you, one of the things, my wife has been down in the Keys during the COVID thing, doing some family stuff. And I started looking at cat boats.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like little sailboats, because you can't really afford an inboard.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's no way I'm going to be buying a big boat. But a cat boat now,
you can play with it.
Yeah,
I've actually gotten into and I hate it because it's now become trendy. I got into the stand-up paddleboard thing.
Gotcha.
A couple years ago, I actually did a trip, and I don't know how I survived it. I did a trip where it was actually about a dozen Peruvian guys who wanted to do a stand-up paddleboard expedition down the Madre de Dios, which is a tributary
to
the
Amazon.
Yeah, and it's through the area we all read about in the news where it's heavy cocaine area and then contested for gold development. So it's like BBC had an article the other day about how deadly the Madre de Dios is. But they reached out to me and were like, hey, we want a photographer to come along with this. And I had never been on a stand-up paddleboard before, and I had never been to the Amazon or South America before. And I was like, sure, why not? I'll learn. And
holy smokes, when was this?
This was 2017.
Yeah.
And so I flew down to Peru and got on. Luckily, we had supply rafts. So during some of this early part of this, we started up in the cloud forest, and it was like Cat 3 and 4 whitewater. And there's no way I'm on a stand-up paddleboard with a camera in that. Yeah. So I rode in the raft and shot. And then as we went further down, hopped on the paddleboard.
Did you have some whitewater experience?
Growing up, I'd been in just Western rivers, but not formal whitewater.
Yeah.
I grew up reading Whitewater Rescue. I remember my dad's folded copy of Whitewater Rescue book.
Right.
So it's theoretically I knew what to do, but it was also one of those naive young things of like, I'll figure it out. This will be great.
Right. Have you ever read Peter Matthiesen's The Cloud Forest?
No.
They descend that river really early, like in the 50s.
Oh, I'll have to read it.
And it's great.
Nice.
And there's a indigenous tribe there, the Mashagwinga.
Yeah.
And they have to really negotiate their way through.
Yeah.
And there's this enormous whirlpool where they lose one of their they make balsa rafts.
Jeez.
It's a great story.
I'll have to jot that down because it's a hell of a part of the world.
Yeah. How did you do in the jungle? Did you get sick?
I did get sick. Yeah. So I went in and did I'm sure, again, I took years off my life with the amount of DEET I used.
Yeah.
Because they have leishmaniasis down there.
Yep.
And I was like, I'm not.
Can you explain what that is real quick?
The flesh-eating, what is it, bacteria?
I don't know. It's injected by a sandfly.
Yeah. It's little sandfly bites and basically your flesh dissolves and is eaten.
Yeah.
Something you don't want to mess with.
And I remember that as a kid, we would look up pictures.
Oh.
And there's one where it gets in your palate. And it takes your whole palate out, and then that's you're done for at that point.
Oh yeah. And I did the mistake, of course, now with Google, we can Google stuff. And before we go anywhere, I did this go to Australia. I'm like, okay, I need to know what does a tiger snake look like? And just in case something happens.
Yeah.
And I made the mistake of looking at leishmaniasis on the web, and I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah. I had a friend who got it in Belize, and he had to come back. He was broke and working down there on an orange, plantation, orange groves, and he got it. And
sounds horrible.
Last time I heard he had successfully recovered, but
good.
And that's what messed with the golden dorado fishing in Bolivia. I think you have to be careful of it.
Yep. Yeah. And there's so much. My main impression of the jungle, and all of us really, because we would pull up our paddle boards at night and sleep on the board on the side of the jungle.
Yeah.
And it seems like everything is trying to kill you.
Yeah.
The plants and the animals.
Was that your first time in the equatorial forest?
Yeah. I had gone inland in Belize a little bit and just seen Alton Ha and some of the sites there, but had never been jungle off the path jungle.
Yeah.
Incredibly humbling. I remember coming out of that, came into Cusco. We were in the jungle for 2 weeks and came out and was just like, I can't believe I'm alive and healthy. And I got sick. I had a bad fever and kind of went through that whole thing. I remember laying on a paddleboard with mosquito netting over me and just staring up at the sky and be like, this is how the guys in Africa felt when they were, it was that weird fever clear moment.
Yep.
But came out of it and came back, and it was the best thing because it was just like, wow, that could have gone so wrong in so many ways. One morning we had some of the gold miners come running down. We were further down the river, and they had the big motor canoes. Yeah. And they came running through, and guys with guns and big oil drums taking it to one of the mining camps. Yeah. And the Peruvians I was with, I had my camera, of course. I'm like, oh, this is history. I want to document this. I'm like, put your camera away. We can't do that. Yeah. Driving back out from where we came out of the river to Cusco, we drove through the night, through the kind of ascending up through the cloud forest again, and before we dropped into Cusco. Yeah. And 1 or 2 a.m., all of a sudden, we're bumping down this rough jungle road. Spotlights come on, a bunch of lights come on, and guys in full battle black uniform step out, and it's the anti-drug unit coming out to just hey, show us your paperwork. What are you doing here? Yeah. And all the guys I was with were like, you're an American woman, get in the front of the van. We're on a big van, which of course looks sketchy. Yeah. Get in the front of the van. But it was middle of the night. These guys are up patrolling the jungle. So it's a fascinating part of the world. I was really glad to be with the guys I was with because they were local and knew it. Right.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories in Outside, I think it's on Outside Online, is those kayakers that got taken by the FARC in Colombia.
I remember that story.
It's a really good story.
It's amazing, and it's so well executed.
Yeah, and the woman commander that captured them and all, they were very polite. They weren't. It was no hard feelings.
It's just the way it is.
But you're not leaving either. Yeah. And it wasn't. That's a really cool story. That was a podcast as well.
Oh, I haven't listened to the podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice. But did you feel like there was danger like that in that stretch?
There were moments. Honestly, I was more concerned with leishmaniasis and getting some kind of malaria or dengue or whatever is in
something
there.
that might kill you before you can get out.
Yeah, and I don't do snakes, and we saw enough big, like the anaconda snakes.
Yeah.
Well, of course the risk is so low, but it gets in your head in the middle of the night.
Did you see those little vipers too?
Yes.
Yeah.
And those are the ones you really have to worry about, obviously. But I mean, there's just, again, there's so much stuff in there that you feel, especially in the middle of the night, sleeping outside, you're like, everything's coming to eat me.
Yeah. Was it really loud?
It was super loud.
So loud, man.
And again, it makes you feel so small. It's so humbling just to be like, all right, and again, my theory through a lot of this has been, if something happened and I died, like, it'll be a newspaper headline somewhere.
Right.
Whenever I die, however I die, I would love for it to be a headline somewhere. Yeah. So there we go. It's when you go out, make a headline has been like a personal motto for many years. So,
right on, man.
Yeah.
That's a good motto. It gets you in a lot of into adventure.
Yeah,
I was going to say
trouble.
You might not get in trouble.
Yeah, adventure / trouble, depending. Yeah.
I remember being in the Delta and around down by Bling in Brazil where the Amazon dumps in.
Yeah.
And I was like 18 and I was going to do some chin-ups,
Oh, gee.
So I jump up and grab this branch. And everything, there's lines of those ants.
Yes.
And they're just like you're just like immediately eating because you were stupid and there ain't nobody that lives there would ever jump up and grab that branch to do chin-ups.
It's amazing. I remember they had someone had gotten hurt. Someone got a minor cut, and there's an ant that the locals use it, where if you have a cut, you hold them up, they'll bite the cut and seal it.
Yeah. Wow, I've seen that on a picture.
And they would do these little, it was stitches with ant mouths.
Wow.
And that was actually like their, you've got a cut. This is how we do it. I mean, it's that kind of jungle medicine that works. There's so much medicine in the jungle, I feel
How did you keep? Oh, yeah, because there's so many things that need medication.
That's true. That's really true. Yeah.
How did you keep your gear dry and keep from dropping it in the river?
Pelican cases were a big one.
Own the paddleboard?
Yeah.
Or in the raft too.
Usually in the raft. I am that person, and I did it this weekend where I strap a Pelican case to the front of a paddleboard.
Gotcha.
I would not advise it to anyone listening. Never do that.
Yeah.
I would not advise it.
Yeah.
But it works pretty. I have like the 1510 Pelicans, a smaller Pelican. But a lot of it's, and then just keeping gear clean and making sure I section it in somewhere with some desiccants at night to really try and suck the moisture out of it.
Gotcha. How long was that trip?
We had, I think, 13 days in the jungle.
Well,
and then I had a couple bumper days in Cusco on either end.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was a long
Where can we see those photos?
They're on my website.
Okay.
JessMcGlothlinmedia.com. And then a couple, like Afar magazine there have been a couple editorial outlets that ran the story as well.
Gotcha.
But
what's one of them?
Afar.
I don't know that one.
It's just AFAR, like it sounds, and it's an online kind of high-end travel publication.
Cool.
They're doing a good job right now with all the COVID stuff with armchair travel.
Right.
So they're a good escape.
And you were, another thing I ran across looking you up was the Southern Chile stuff. When was that?
So that was February. That was an interesting one.
Right before this all happened?
Right before this went down there. I had been in Belize in early February. Came back to Montana for a few weeks.
And what were you shooting in Belize?
Fly fishing stuff. Fly fishing and lifestyle.
Yeah.
Just kind of a trip to get stock
images. Is that
images.
bonefish or tarpon or?
Bonefish.
Gotcha.
Mostly, they're tarpon down there in Permit, but this was mostly bonefish.
Yeah.
And then I needed a bunch of stock shots of Keycocker, like one of just the towns.
Yep.
So I came back to Montana, and we were kind of hearing about COVID. Like, it was a thing in China and then slowly moving through Europe. I flew down to southern Chile and was on a shoot for Orvis. We were shooting new product. I have a friend who actually bought a $900 van here in Missoula and has spent a year and a half driving it down to southern Chile, which is a hell of a story. Really cool guy. He had a raft and his dog, and met up with him at the end of his trip because I wanted to kind of document it. And I'd never been to Chile. What a cool adventure.
Yeah, I've never been that far south either.
I really want to go back. We met up with him, and then a gal named Skylar who guides in Alaska. Super cool. One of the few women I've met in the industry who is super legit. Like, she's not in it for the gram. She's not in it for the social media. She just gets shit done. She's amazing. And
she's a fishing guide?
She's a fishing guide. She and her husband both guide in Alaska, and then she guides manatee tours in Florida during the off season.
Wow, that's cool.
She's hardworking, just super fishy gal. She could outfish both Zach and I.
Yeah.
But met up with them, and we just camped and kind of went. Zach had once guided about 4 hours north in Chile of where we were, and Skylar had guided in this same region. So they knew the spots to go, which was great.
Yeah.
And we fished, and I was shooting product for Orvis. So, had everyone in waders and gear and all that.
Yeah. Did you catch fish?
So many fish.
Yeah.
It was so good. It wasn't the mind-blowing trout fishing, but Skylar had one brown trout that was amazing. Yeah,
I've seen pictures of these incredibly clear, like rivers of the imagination, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's stunning. It's just vast and big and so windy all the time.
Uh-huh.
It was interesting camping.
Is there any timber?
There's some.
Yeah.
It's a lot of it.
Can you burn? What do you burn, like, for firewood?
We bought firewood from a local farm.
Yeah.
There's some around, and it varies. We camped some places where it was big open pampas, and then some where it was more kind of farmland.
Yeah. They have cottonwoods?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, to be honest. Yeah.
I was just reading that Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid,
Oh, right.
Where I think they were in, is it Chubut? Chubut? How do you, Chubut?
I'm terrible with South American names.
Yeah, but they bounced around down there, before I think they got killed in Paraguay, actually.
Yeah.
But they bounced around down there as legitimate ranchers for a while.
I would love to learn more about their story.
It's pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
And they were kind of funny and benevolent, even though they were armed robbers. There's no doubt about that. But
could have been worse, guys.
It could have been worse, guys. Yeah,
that's
but
awesome.
I've always been fascinated with it for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling you the young lady packed for us on this Wyoming trip. She spends a couple months in some estancia there.
That's amazing.
Every year. And then my buddy also got on that whole packing deal down there.
Yeah.
He didn't like the weather. He said it never quit raining where he was.
Oh, that'd be tough.
It was in Patagonia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the weather's just harsh. We were lucky. We had some rain, but it was just wind nonstop.
Uh-huh. So February is fall there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So they're opposite us.
Gotcha.
It was gorgeous, easy to travel, super cheap. We were sleeping in tents and just grabbing food as we went.
Yeah.
But came back, flew out of Balmaceda and...
This is Chile.
In Chile.
Yeah.
Up to Santiago, I guess, was the big airport. And it was March 2nd.
Yeah.
And I remember landing in Santiago and actually seeing the news and going, oh, shit. Like, by that time, I think Seattle was blowing up with COVID, and it was a thing.
Yeah, that was when it was,
Yep. And I just remember looking at that and going, we still didn't know. We still don't really have a full grasp on what it is. But at that point, it was just like, oh, is this an Ebola-level event, or what is this?
Exactly.
And
that's exactly what we were asking there.
Yeah. No, and I have friends who do... Doctors Without Borders, and I've spent a lot of time talking with them, and it could have been. At that point, we had no idea, and it is luckily, not luckily, but it could have been much worse than what it is.
Well, we were talking about this, and I really followed that Ebola stuff in Liberia, because I had a couple of friends that were expatriates from the civil wars there and stuff.
Oh, right.
And it wasn't handled nearly as badly as our media kind of. You can't handle it.
Yeah.
This is what it was. It's like you can't really handle a disease event like that.
Absolutely.
And which we are painfully aware of at this moment in our country.
Exactly.
But had this been an Ebola type event, there wouldn't be any mask protests or anything like that. People would be running. They'd be doing anything. They wouldn't be out with the AR-15 and burning the mask or whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah, it would be a very different reality.
It would be very different reality, and we didn't know in March 1st what that was.
Oh yeah, I remember flying back and seeing. I got a call from my dad, who retired doc, and he was like, "Hey, you might want to wash your hands a bit more and not touch your face."
Yep.
And I grew up okay, you need stitches, rub dirt in and walk it off. It's very much just deal with it.
Yep.
And I knew when he sent me a text and was like, hey, be careful. I was like, oh, damn, what's happening?
Yep.
And even at that point, I remember coming back to Missoula and being like, all right, couple months, things will be off kilter. And then the world will resume back to normal. Yep. And the week I came back, I had 9 shoots cancel. And at that point, I was like, there's my year is gone.
Yeah.
So it was really coming back from a trip that was that good to that kind of reality it was a a shock.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's as for all of us, it's been a wild ride since then.
Yeah.
You know.
And so how do you make it now?
Now with COVID normal or with...
Yeah, COVID normal.
I'm really fortunate. So I actually got picked up by Onyx Hunt, who's headquartered here in Missoula, and I'm one of their writers, in-house writers.
Cool.
So they're good enough when things are normal. They let me go wander and do my freelance stuff. I swear I would never, after Orvis, which Orvis was a great experience, but I swear I'd never have a desk job again.
Yep.
And when Onyx approached me, it was intriguing enough where I was like, all right, I'll try it. You know, cool tech company,
You
cool
had
space.
this pre-COVID?
Yeah. So I started with them. Gosh, I just had my 2-year anniversary. So I'd been there for a while. And I've been really grateful for that during this because I can still piecemeal freelance work. I actually have my first international shoot scheduled for September. Yeah. Assuming countries stay open. It's in Belize. Belize isn't open yet. So I have to hope they open and then remain open.
Right.
But yeah, Onyx has been keeping me very busy, which is good.
Do they have a blog?
They do.
Yeah.
Yep. So they've got a blog, and then I write everything from PR, press releases to emails to social media content to blog to kind of anything that's written coming out of there. And there's a team of writers, which is good.
Yeah. Are you working from home?
Now I am. Yeah. So I came back from that trip to Chile, got home Monday in the wee hours, and showed up to the office Monday morning like, hey, guys, I've been gone. What's happening? And my creative director looked at me. He's like, get your ass home. Which at that point, quarantine, traveling and having 2 weeks at home wasn't a thing. Yeah. And I spent 2 weeks at home, and then the day I was supposed to go back into the office, they sent everyone home. Gotcha. So that whole team's been remote since March. Right. Wow. And
what a world.
What a world. Luckily, we're in, as much as I sometimes hate technology, luckily we're in a world where we can do that.
Exactly. Yeah. And you've been picking up freelance stuff for the Associated Press and
just for odds and ends. I'm trying to, a lot of my main editorial work, I do a lot typically in the UK and Australian markets, and they're all on hold. All my magazines there in March were like, hey, we're going to try and pick up in September. Yeah. So I have so much stuff. I'm sure you know how it is. A lot of stuff that's filed and waiting to be run. Yeah. That's just on kind of indeterminate hold.
Suspended.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's a weird, I thought I had a decent business plan. I in no way, shape, or form had pandemic in my business plan.
Right. I don't think anybody did, though.
It's been a lot of nights laying awake, kind of being like, all right, what is this? Even a year from now, once things kind of get back to normal. Right. It will, I don't think, ever be the normal that it was. Right. So we're all going to have to think on our feet and adapt. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know what I've got. I've got like this contract to produce this book. Right. And I just feel like I was like flying through I made it through the door. Absolutely. As the doors were slamming, well done. Yeah. Well, yeah, look, and there's a lot of luck. Yeah, there is. And it was just, and I'm starting those chapters in the West instead of in the Southeast where I was going to start them. Right. That makes sense. And I was going to drive down there. My daughter wanted to go to Auburn, Alabama and look at the vet school and all that. But they've just come out of this quarantine because of a positive test on a prom. Oh, gee. And so we're done with that for a moment. Right. And it's not that anybody's holed up. We're doing what we want to do. Absolutely. But it's different. Yeah. It is different. And I've traveled. I travel all the time. Totally. And I figure, and it's going to be very personal. I get several emails a week from people being like, are you traveling? How dare you travel? Yeah. It's everything from the kind of the social shaming to, hey, how do I do this safely? And it's personal for everyone. Yep. It's my theory for me has been, I'm going to take reasonable risks. And like when I get back from Belize, if that trip happens, I'll not see people for 2 weeks. Yep. And just like, you'll be plenty occupied editing and producing what you do. That's the beauty of your work. Totally. And mine as well. I was just really thinking about these musicians, and I know Taylor Swift has produced this incredible album of songs in the quarantine. I saw some headline about that. I am so terrible with pop culture. I know nothing about it, to be honest. I heard somebody sent me one of them, and it is great. Nice. Right? Okay. But she's also got a lot of money. Absolutely. And she's very successful, right? So I'm thinking about all these guys and gals who are
play in venues. Like, you don't make money on song sales anymore.
Oh, yeah.
So you're making money from performing, and you can't. And that's going to be huge. That's really painful.
Huge. And we all know people who, I mean, my brother's lost his job during this. My mom was furloughed for months. Like, we all know people who have dealt with this, and I'm really curious what this fall and winter will look like. Because it's not going to go away.
Right.
So I'm very curious to see kind of how we as a culture adapt to that.
And adapt our own, and we could really go into another thing on this.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I told you, my buddy Kevin Tim called me this morning from Seek Outside.
Yeah.
And he is just like, they're just selling so much outdoor gear. People are socially distancing by going like these huge trips in the Rockies and anywhere, like they just walking away, you know, which is wonderful.
It's fantastic.
And we were talking about like he did not have a positive spin on all the various genies we're letting out of our bottles, but he did have a positive spin on a lot, like I called the seed salesman in Missouri. They're completely out of seeds, every kind of seed.
Really?
Yeah, because people are staying home in their garden.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Like, that's a transformation.
Yeah.
Hunting, I think, I hear this a lot. It's going to be bigger this year because people want their own meat.
Yep.
I already got there's a Doll Ranch down in town, Clancy, Montana. It's going to start, like, selling meat.
Nice.
And we needed this for a long time.
We have. I think the reset and kind of the slowing down for people will hopefully be really good.
Yeah.
There's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of genies let out of a lot of bottles that are not good.
You're right.
There is some good stuff I think that will come of this.
There is. I just, I was watching that, I hadn't seen in a long time, that movie Avatar.
Yeah.
Then the other one I was thinking about was, in Life of Pi, which the book I didn't really love that much, but when I saw the movie, I loved it. Yeah. And he says which story is true.
Oh, yeah.
At the end, the guy says, whichever one you choose.
That's true.
And I was like, wow, this is like the story of these weird transformations. It's ours to choose it.
Absolutely.
And that's, which I think is, your level of like international experience of like being a person. Also, again, you're not going on vacation to Samoa.
Right.
You are going. You have to really, and I know this from running on other people's expenses for stories. You really have to. You got to produce.
It's work.
Yeah, you are not going to sleep well until you have done your commitment.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's something that I bet you people who are on the outside of your business, like looking in, they probably hadn't thought of that one.
Oh, absolutely.
When somebody floats you a $3,500 plane ticket and $5,000 expenses or whatever, and they're going to pay you as well, you really better show up and
better know your shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's definitely something I have no formal training in this. So it's something I've worked with a lot of, like, especially before I had really a body of work and the commercial clients to say, all right, I did this for so-and-so. Yeah. It was, all right, they're trusting me with, like, that Costa shoot. First big commercial shoot, they're trusting me with a huge budget. And then we're flying people out from all over the world and we're doing this and that. And it's a lot of pressure, but God, it feels good when it all comes together.
You do, yeah.
It's so good.
I'm sure. And then also, if you blow it, you're out. Yep. So what you do is you just don't blow it.
Totally. There's no room, and that's one thing that actually used to scare the shit out of me. I really like it about this industry. You screw up once, and that, especially with social media, that reputation stays with you. Right. And there's, I think, I'm beginning to think there's kind of a beauty to that, of like, all right, you need to be a responsible adult all the time and know when you can let your hair down and know when you absolutely can't. Yeah, for sure. Well, what's next? Oh, I'm doing a lot of stuff this summer around Montana and Idaho, just kind of shooting that. And then hopefully Belize in September. We'll see. Going down to shoot. It's an interesting thing, kind of social proof marketing material for a lodge I've worked with for years. El Pescador. It's a really good lodge in San Pedro. But shooting marketing. This is Belize? Yep. Yeah. Shooting marketing material that shows people safely interacting in this new paradigm, which. Interesting. It's been really interesting to try and pull together a shot list for that. Yeah. And think, all right, how do we, in one social media photo, how do you show that you can come to Belize and it's safe, but we're also responsible? Yeah. Right. So, yeah, it's going to be It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Well, I know you got work this afternoon.
Yeah, sadly, I go right from here into other meetings. So there's no rest for the wicked, I guess.
No, but you've worked yourself into an interesting place.
It's fun.
I mean, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, I just think that. Well, your story of these vast trips and stuff like that, but you have worked there's a meritocracy in what you do, and I'm not saying you're on the top of it, because you're in the working part of it. But you've really worked yourself to an interesting place, man.
Well, thank
Doesn't
you.
it feel
fun.
like it?
No, I love it. I definitely have moments where I feel like, all right, I have my act together, I know what I'm doing, and then moments where it's just like, oh, I've got so far to go, which I wouldn't have it any other way.
Right.
I want to be that. If I live to however old I live to be, I don't think I'll live to be very old. I'll die doing something stupid.
Make a headline, man.
Make a headline. But
you'll have to put that off as long as possible. Though.
Exactly. Yeah. It'll be hopefully a headline in the future, far future.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to be that person who's still learning new stuff until the headline. You know, so it's as long as I can keep learning and meeting cool people on the way.
Were you ever attracted to conflict journalism?
Yes.
Like war and stuff?
Yeah, I actually spent some time on going way back. That's the reason I first got into photography.
Yeah.
Wanting to do that. And that was during, late 2000, around 2006 and 7. So we were still very much at war.
The Afghanistan stuff, yeah.
And I had friends over there, and that was something I really wanted to do. I would still like to get back to that at some point.
Right.
But I contracted with the military for a while and spent time at Leavenworth and Leonard Wood and went through like a modified basic training. And spending time at Leavenworth, I was at the Command and General Staff College there, and seeing, it's basically where very talented officers from different armies come together and better warfare.
Yeah.
And that was the coolest experience. To be able to run around there with a camera and talk to these guys, that gave me a much better understanding of war. And war as a business and war as a theory.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, 5-10 years from now, I wouldn't be surprised if I do the fishing stuff for fun and I get more back to that kind of thing.
Right. It was really hard because and who knows, maybe this will change, but Americans' attention span for our own wars was too short for me as a journalist to make any money or living.
Yes, and I think it is a very political thing, but people view too much of the political side and not enough of the humanities side. I don't know, and that's a personal opinion, obviously, but I struggled with how war was portrayed and war was talked about in culture. I had this argument with someone I work with at Onyx 3 days ago. Like it's very much a thing still, is how war is perceived.
Sure. You know Elliot Woods, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and Elliot did it for a while.
He did.
You know, and he started out in National Guard and then went back as a journalist. And he'd be a good guy to have in this conversation.
Absolutely.
But my plan was to start like a proto blog and have a subscription.
Yeah.
Because as a stringer, I couldn't even get somebody to give me an airplane ticket.
Oh yeah.
Because they didn't need it.
Exactly.
Nobody was reading it.
No one's reading it, and there's no way you're gonna to cover your expenses.
Yeah, I couldn't pay the bills.
And there's so
much.
I
couldn't pay the bills.
Yeah.
And I had little children then, but I still could have done it. I don't ever go anywhere thinking it's going to kill me. If I think it's going to kill me, I probably won't go.
Right. Which is a good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that whole idea I was obsessed with that for a long time. And then I came back into natural resources stuff.
Right.
And I could tell you why. It's because all the wars are smoke.
Yeah.
They're fought over natural resources.
It's true.
And other than our Civil War, which was economic and weird Declaration of Independence social questions about the future of America and Kansas and all, most wars are just fought over who's got the dirt and who wants it.
That's very true, actually. That's interesting.
And who's got the pass and the mountains that you got to bring the goods through.
Back through history.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
Yeah. And so and fishing and hunting to me has always been the closest relationship we have with that natural world.
Right.
And so it was easy for me to stay in this. And it's not because I got older or because my kids needed me. They did. Right. Now they're grown. I could jet into Syria now.
Wherever.
Nobody would care.
Yeah. No, totally.
But in the end, I was interested in what the dirt
Yeah.
The dirt, the water.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
it's
a tight-knit community there. I don't know, and I think that thought process I really like. Of like, all right, what are we actually fighting about?
What are we fighting about?
Yeah, at the very basic
because we're always
level.
going to be fighting.
Oh, of course. It's never we're people. We're humans.
Yep.
It's never going to go
You can
away.
go to the Missoula Club tonight or whatever.
Yeah.
And you'll see it on the micro.
Totally.
You know, or you can go to, I guess Lebanon is in some kind of terrible free fall right now. Right? Economic free fall, and there'll be trouble. We got trouble right here.
Yeah. And I had a job in northern Jordan 2 years ago, like right on the border, and just kind of talking to people who had come across the border and seeing that firsthand, like, it's an interesting thing. It made me want to, again, get back to that kind of work.
Sure.
But
what were you doing there?
Documenting. There's a little village right on the border with women who have come across and are now mentoring other women who come across the border and teaching them how to do weaving and making paper and pottery.
Yeah.
So it's a really cool kind of, then they sell that work to the tourism industry and to hotels.
Yep.
So it was just a really interesting story. Actually, Cool Clothing sponsored the story. And that kind of worked out. It was an interesting partnership, but a really good one.
Gotcha.
But just a cool kind of micro story of people making good out of a really shitty situation.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, they did. There was a group in Honduras that employed refugees from the Contra War in the 80s. And they made these hats and they made all kind of stuff, and then they would sell those in the United States and then send the money back, and it was subsistence.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
It was definitely just enough to make rice and beans.
Yeah, but it's something.
Well, it beats the heck out of like laying there and not getting any rice and beans.
Exactly. Yeah,
or going back into the conflict zone and being conscripted. Yeah, which is what was happening.
And it's a purpose. It's building a life of some kind.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to let you go to the next appointment.
I appreciate this.
Was very
so
cool.
Much fun. Thank you.
I'm glad. I knew it would work out.
It was awesome.
I knew the story was there.
It's like I said, it's a weird, convoluted story, but I appreciate you kind of meandering through it with
non-linear.
Me. Yeah, very non-linear.
That's where we live.
It's the only way to be. Hey.
Right. Unless you're linear, which, oh my Lord, would I crave that sometime.
Oh, I could never. I've yet to hold down a serious relationship, I think, just because I'm so non-linear. I can't.
Moving to the next thing?
Yeah, I can't stay on the single track, so we'll see.
Right on. Well, I much appreciate it, and I wish you luck in September.
Thank you, Hal. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yep, thank you. Hey, this has been Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Podcast and Blast. I'm Hal Herring. We're signing off for this one, but we'll be back in a week or 10 days. And meantime, check out backcountryhunters.org. Get some more podcasts there and see what we're up to. And also, I'm going to be out there wandering around, hunting and fishing, wearing out a pair of boots. And I hope you'll be doing the same thing. We're living in God's pocket, and we need to celebrate that. Never forget it. And get out there and live it and enjoy it. Hey, thanks a lot, everybody. Talk soon.